What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Young Guns podcast, where we're going to be continuing our award series in terms of who we think is going to win each individual award. And up next, we have the Maurice Rocket Richard Trophy. And this is an interesting one because, there's not really anyone that's surprising in terms of who we're going to be talking about today, but there might be two guys that are up and coming and could surprise people, but they do have the potential to eventually win it sometime in their career. But what if they surprise people and win it this year? So, guys, before we start, we're just going to talk about our sponsor, Bet99. So, if you like fantasy hockey, football, or other casino games, sign up to Bet99. The link is in the description below, and you could use our code, which is YoungGuns1. You must be 19 years old and up to play, and you have to play responsibly. And also the Mind Foundation Canada, they raise funds and awarenesses to find cures for neurological disease and disorders. They're currently focused on mental health. So if you want to donate, the link is in a description below. So guys, the first guy we're going to be talking about today is someone that's chasing Wayne Gretzky's record. And I'm wearing the jersey right now, as you guys can see.
The coat.
The captain of the Washington Capitals, Alexander Ovechkin.
Yeah, and listen, look, Ovi is the best goal scorer of this generation. Obviously, Matthews is going to be that guy once Ovi retires. But to me, Alex Ovechkin, last season especially, 50 goals, 40 assists, 90 points in 77 games. He's 36 years old. He's not getting any younger, but he seems to still be putting the puck in the back of the net. And I think for me, you can never count out Alex Ovechkin in his career. Like I said, he's the best goal scorer in this generation. He's a guy who's carried Washington on his back since he joined the league, and I think he's obviously one of the favorites to win the Rocket like he is every year because he's Alex Ovechkin, and he's a guy he's pretty much guaranteed 50 goals. Like that's pretty much Alex Ovechkin. That's always been Alex Ovechkin. And so I wouldn't necessarily be surprised if he hits 50 again this year. Actually, I wouldn't be surprised if he hits 50 again this year. But for me, I think he's definitely a finalist. I think he's definitely up there as potential names. But like you mentioned, there's a lot of other guys that are going to be very interesting this season to kind of watch out for in terms of the Rocket Richard. And I think Ovi, yes, as much as he's a guy who scores 50 goals, and I think he probably gets it again this year, he is getting old, and you have to take age into consideration when you talk about this because, yes, you can do it consistently for so many years and be the best goal scorer in the league, but also do it consistently. But, at some point he's going to decline, right? And so it's just a matter of, is that going to be this season, or do you think that he still potentially has 1 to 2 years left of hitting 50 or 60 goals or whatever it is before he finally declines? Because at some point Ovechkin's going to decline. It's just going to happen, right? So do you think, Chris, in your opinion, seeing Ovechkin and kind of where he's at in his career at this stage, do you think that he declines, or do you think he's
no
a lock
way.
for 40, 50 goals?
He hit 50 goals last year. He's on a mission right now. Kuznetsov is finally playing back to the old Kuznetsov that he once was before the whole scandal and all that stuff. Yeah. And it's clicking. Unfortunately, Tom Wilson's not going to be there for a couple of months, but Connor Brown is there, and he's a very underrated player that has been added to the Washington Capitals, a guy that went on a goal streak, if it wasn't last year, if I'm mistaken, maybe 2 years ago, where, this guy was surprising people and scoring goals. So, I mean, I think that line of Brown, Kuznetsov, and Ovechkin is going to be very beneficial for every single player on that line, but most importantly, Alexander Ovechkin. He's not going to, I would never assume that he's going to get less than 30 goals until the day he retires. He has a couple years left on his contract, and he's going to potentially, I see it happening, past Wayne Gretzky's record, and he will, maybe not this year, but by the time he finishes his career, he will have his 10th Maurice Rocket Richard trophy. He currently has 9 Rocket trophies. I think he will eventually get his 10th. If it's not this year, at least before the end of his career. But let's move on to another guy that, everyone is hailing as the favorite, Auston Matthews, who had 60 goals last year for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And he was on a hotline himself with Michael Bunting, who was one of the best rookies last year, and his partner in crime, Mitch Marner.
Well, I mean, look, I think for me, it's clear and obvious. If Auston Matthews is healthy, he's probably a Rocket Richard winner. And I don't think there's any real debate there. Um, I know the Leafs this year didn't improve I think the Leafs got worse statistically on paper. But if we're talking about Auston Matthews as the player that he is, look, he hit 60 goals last year. Like, that is something that in this day and age is already hard to do because goaltenders are better, right? And he did it. He hit 60, and you can even argue that had the shortened season of 50 games or the bubble year, had that been a full 82 game season, he probably hit 60 goals that year too. So Auston Matthews right now at this very moment is the best goal scorer in the league. And to me, I don't see him, declining or having a worse season than he did last year. I think maybe he doesn't hit 60, but I think for sure 45 to 50 goals, maybe even a bit more than 50 goals. I can definitely see that for Auston Matthews. He's proven it. He's hit 40 goals consecutively for the last 3 years. He's had in his 6 seasons in the NHL, he hasn't had below 34. So to me, that's a guy who's a goal scorer in this league, and he's a guy that I think is probably your lock for the Rocket Richard this season and for years to come. He's the best goal scorer in the league. Like, there's no debate on that, in my opinion.
And he's the youngest guy that finished in the top 3 last year. So I mean, it's only normal that he hasn't even hit his prime, in my opinion. Prime ages are 25 up to like 28. He's currently 24 years old, and he had 60 goals that past season. So I really do think that he will hit the plateau of 50. Will he win the Rocket? I think he's currently the favorite, but anything is possible. There's always surprises, and a surprise that I want to mention is Alex DeBrincat on a really bad Chicago Blackhawks team. Alex DeBrincat got 41 goals. Now he is playing for the Ottawa Senators, where he could be on a line with either Tim Stützle and Claude Giroux or Josh Norris and Drake Batherson. And this team is looking to shock a lot of people. And DeBrincat is a natural elite goal scorer. He's a sniper. So he's going to a better team. That means that increases his chances automatically to have a better season in terms of his goal scoring ability.
I would disagree with that point, and I'm not saying that I don't see he's going to hit. I think he will hit probably 35, 40 goals. I don't really have a doubt with that. My only thing with DeBrincat is when you look at his career, a lot of what he's done, a lot of his production has come playing next to Patrick Kane. And I know that Chicago wasn't a good team last year, but Patrick Kane is still elite, right? And Patrick Kane is probably the best winger in the league, or one of the best wingers in the league, you can argue, especially in terms of, playmaking and stuff. So taking DeBrincat away from Patrick Kane is obviously not a good thing for him. Yes, he's going to a better team in Ottawa, and he's probably going to play alongside, like you mentioned, Stützle and Giroux or Batherson and, whoever, Josh Norris, let's say. But in terms of goal scoring, you've got an interesting situation in Ottawa because there's a lot of good players, right? Tkachuk's a guy that can score. Batherson's a guy that can score. And yeah, okay, they don't have that elite sniper, and DeBrincat is that guy. But is DeBrincat a lock for 50 goals or a lock to potentially win the Rocket Richard? I'm not so sure. I think he's a guy that gets you 40. I think maybe a bit more than 40. But I think if you're looking at where the elite goal scorers are in this league, like Ovechkin and Matthews, I don't think he's going to be the guy that's going to get 50 goals. I might be wrong at the end of this, and people might look back at this video and say, Luca, you're an idiot. What are you talking about? But I just personally don't look at DeBrincat as this is the guy that's going to win a Rocket Richard. I think he's a guy that definitely helps Ottawa. I think their power play is going to be better. I think he's going to score a lot of goals for the Senators. I just don't know if he hits 50. And that's kind of where I see it. And I think 50 is the cutoff point if you want to be considered a Rocket Richard winner, in my opinion.
And, when it comes to talking about awards, there's always 2 guys that come to mind, 2 guys that play with each other on the same team, Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid. Draisaitl with 55 goals last season and McDavid with 44. These guys are guys that you never count out in terms of
No.
awards. And, those are two candidates as well. When you think about, McDavid and Draisaitl, you think about, how good they are overall. But, when it comes to overall stats, they have a lot of goals as well, not just assists. So, obviously, you would have to take that into consideration. You don't obviously think, oh, elite sniper, franchise, sniper, whatever you want terminology you would like to use when it comes to Draisaitl and McDavid. They're just all around good players.
Well,
They're generational talents.
One thing that I've really noticed about Connor McDavid, especially, is he's never hit 50 goals in his career. And that is very surprising considering Connor McDavid and the point totals that he puts up every single season. And I think that eventually, and I see it because he's Connor McDavid and it will happen eventually. I think he's eventually going to win a Rocket Richard. And I think he might even do it this season. This is a guy who last year scored 44 goals and had 123 points. He's a guy who's hit 40 goals 3 out of 7 years that he's been there. He's had 33 and 34 respectively. He's a 30-goal scorer. I think with Connor McDavid, if he passes the puck a little bit less and he shoots more, he's definitely a guy for 50 goals, and I think he's definitely a guy that can hit the Rocket Richard. What's interesting is in Edmonton, like you mentioned, they have an interesting situation because Draisaitl and McDavid are two fantastic and elite players. And like you mentioned, Leon Draisaitl hit 55 goals last year. Draisaitl for me is top 3. If I have to look at the 3 guys that potentially win the Maurice Richard trophy, actually, and there might be a fourth that we're going to talk about after, but in terms of my top 3 right now, I think it's very clear. It's Auston Matthews, Leon Draisaitl, and Alex Ovechkin. And people might look at it and say those are easy. They're easy because they've proven it for so many years, right? Draisaitl's proven he's hit 50 goals once. He did it again this year. Ovechkin's proven it multiple times in his career, and Auston Matthews has proven it multiple times. So these are guys that have done it before. And so I think, would I like to see a different player, potentially a guy like McDavid? Yeah, but McDavid is so good that he doesn't even need to win the Rocket Richard, and he'll still be considered the best player in the league. I think he'll eventually hit it. I just don't know if it'll be this season, but mind you, they signed the Evander Kane to a full-time contract. He's going to have Evander Kane with him all season. That could be very interesting for Connor McDavid going into this year. And again, I think the Oilers, they're very fortunate to have 2 very good elite players in Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl on their team. But I would not be surprised if either of them win the Maurice Richard trophy. But if I had to lean towards one, it would probably be Draisaitl just because he's done it before.
There's 3 more guys we'd like to cover before we end today's episode. And the first being Kyle Connor, such a player who's criminally underrated.
Yep.
Yes, Winnipeg has been declining in terms of like their status as a top 15 team. They're not the team they once were, but at 25 years old, 47 goals last season, Kyle Connor's always flying under the radar. And this year, he's projected to be playing with Dubois and Perfetti, or maybe he might even be paired up with Scheifele and Wheeler, but it does not matter. This guy knows how to find the back of the net.
And think about this, okay? He hit 47 goals. The Jets missed the playoffs. If Winnipeg makes the playoffs last year, I think he probably scores more goals than what he like. 47 was good for a team that didn't make the playoffs. If the Jets made the playoffs, or if the Jets would have won a little bit more games, I think Kyle Connor scores a lot more than 47. Scores a bit more than 47 goals. This is a guy who I've said it for a while. I think he's a 50-goal scorer in this league with the right line mates and with the right system. And I think he found that system last year in Winnipeg under Dave Lowry, and even before that when Paul Maurice got fired. Now the Jets, they've got a different regime over there in Winnipeg. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens. But I think Kyle Connor, if the Jets become competitive next year and they're a team that's fighting for a playoff spot, or they're in that mix to make the playoffs and they're one of the best teams in the NHL, I think Kyle Connor easily could win the Rocket Richard. And the reason I think that is because, like you mentioned, he's criminally underrated, but he has one of the best shots in the NHL. And I would never leave Kyle Connor open, because every time you leave Kyle Connor open, he makes you pay. And that's just kind of how I've seen it. It's the same thing with Auston Matthews. He's got that instinct to score goals, and I think he's going to prove it again this season. And again, if the Jets are better, Kyle Connor is going to score 50 goals. If the Jets are worse, then Kyle Connor probably won't score as many as people think. But it's going to be based on Winnipeg, because last year he was the best player in Winnipeg, and then everybody else shat the bed. So
Yeah.
I think if he can have a better team around him, he's probably a lock for 50 goals.
Now, quickly, we're going to go through our last two, and that's Kirill Kaprizov and Cole Caulfield. Kirill Kaprizov, 47 goals in a second season with the Minnesota Wild. Obviously, Kevin Fiala not being there hurts the team, but this guy is their franchise player. He knows how to score goals. I don't think he really. People are going to say, Kevin Fiala not being there is going to hurt his production. I don't think so. There's still Ryan Hartman, Matt Zuccarello, Boldy, who's supposed to be taking the next step, Rossi, who's expected to take the next step. They have a good team offensively. I think it's underrated in terms of their offense. So Kaprizov, will he get 50 goals? I don't think so, but he definitely will get over 40 goals, in my opinion. And Cole
Yeah,
Caulfield, just to add to
yeah.
Cole Caulfield's situation, he scored. There's a statistic I was looking at: 22 goals under 37 games with Martin St. Louis. What can he do under a full season under Martin St. Louis, especially playing with Nick Suzuki and perhaps Slavkovsky as a left winger? And that's the first line. Anything's possible, in my opinion.
I look at Kaprizov, and I think for me, he's definitely up there as some of the best goal scorers in the NHL. But I'm not sure. I don't know if Minnesota is going to be that team this year that's going to be that good. And I think a lot of the times too, if you look at it, it's these players, they win the Rocket Richard. Like Matthews was a big part of the reason why the Leafs were where they were last year, just like Ovechkin. And I think Kaprizov plays a big role in Minnesota too. But I don't know. I mean, he hit 47 goals last year. I could definitely see Kaprizov hit 50. I wouldn't be surprised if he does either. To me, the one that's interesting and the one that you brought up is Cole Caulfield. I think it's way too early to give Cole Caulfield shouts at potentially winning the Rocket Richard. The reason I say that is not because I love Cole Caulfield. He's probably my favorite Habs player. But the thing is that you got to kind of understand it from a perspective of, yes, he did score 22 and 37 with St. Louis. But he also didn't score under Ducharme. And that obviously a lot of that had to do with Dom Ducharme not being a good coach and not utilizing him properly. I think we should kind of lower the expectations on Cole Caulfield this year. I think 35, if he can hit 35 and hit 40 this year, then you can start having that conversation the year after as to whether or not he's good enough for that. And I think the reason we do that is because look at Auston Matthews, right? In his first year in the NHL, he had scored 40 goals in his first year. The year after that, he had 34. Mind you, he was injured. But none of these guys break out as these 50 goal scorers right away. Unless your name is Alex Ovechkin, you're not breaking 50 goals the first couple of years of your career. And I think, I think he's got kind of a steady like upgrade in the sense where he's like, this year I'm going to score 35, the year after I'm going to score 40, and the year after that I'm going to score 50. And I think this year, if he does 35, if he hits 35, which is doable, I think, for Cole Caulfield under a full season with St. Louis, then the sky's the limit for the kid. But if he struggles to score or he's not getting 35 or he's not hitting close to 30 this year and he's stuck at 25, then we have to lower those expectations. So for me, I would say 30 to 35 goals this season for Cole Caulfield is realistic. Will he hit more? I mean, if he hits more, he hits more, and that's great for him, and I'm happy for him, and I think he will. And I think he's capable of doing it. I just don't want to put too much pressure on a kid who last year did have struggles during the season,
Exactly.
And regardless of whether that's coaching or not, he still did. He scored 1 goal in 30 games the first.
But with that being said, guys, we'd like to hear your thoughts on this topic. Who will win the Rocket Richard Trophy this upcoming season? My pick, Auston Matthews. Luca, I'm guessing he's going with Matthews as well.
Yeah.
But we'd like to hear who you have as a pick. Make sure to write down in the comment section below. Make sure to like this video. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and share this video with anyone who may be interested. And thank you guys so much for watching this episode. We'll see you on the next episode of the Young Guns Podcast.